All right, hi everybody. Have we had enough food, enough wine? Does anybody feel like they're about to fall asleep? I'm not going to do interpretive dance or anything, so I'm afraid you're going to have to. Also, I don't have any slides, so you're just kind of stuck with me for the next 45 minutes. And if you get really bored, wave at me or something. I'll see if I can make up a story. Right. So, as Petra said, I'm not a developer, although I do have some hacking chops from my childhood. I've spent the last 16 years or so working in digital, largely from a design perspective. Most recently, I was head of strategy for a service design agency called Fjord. But now that I'm free of that, I'm essentially a crusader. So I am properly on a mission to get people, and when I say people, I mean everybody, you guys, me, businesses, anyone, to put people first when they design products, when they think about services, when they think about strategies, when they think about what they're going to do next, to put people at the heart of things. Because people, let's face it, are the heart of every system. It's people who invent technology. It's people who use it or don't. It's people who pay for stuff or don't. It's people who love your products or hate them. People are already the heart of the system. And I think the more we remember that, the better we will do. So I want to start by talking about a bit of the history of digital for the last 10 years or so. One of the things that I think is most important and kind of obvious on the face of it, but we don't say it very much, is that digital in the last 10 years has gone from being optional to kind of mandatory. So 10 years ago, most of the people who did their banking online were geeks. People like us, early adopters, people who were comfortable with the concept or what have you, but most people still went into the bank and either to the ATM or to the actual human being behind the counter. Nowadays, a lot of banks don't even have human beings. Maybe there's one dude that'll help you use the ATM if you're lost, but apart from that, there are no people in there to interact with. And lots of banks don't even have physical locations at all anymore. So digital is mandatory in those cases. Another example is utilities. Everywhere I've lived in the last decade, if you want to have a paper bill for your electricity, your gas, your phone, your whatever, you pay extra, right? You pay extra to not manage it digitally. Same goes for public transit systems. I live in Berlin. Most stations have no humans in them. There's a kiosk there. You want to ride, you need a ticket, you use kiosk. That's it. And what this means is that, one, pretty much everybody, regardless of age or comfort level or whatever, has to engage with digital in some way. It also means that a lot of the adoption that's happened in the last 10 years, or at least up until about 3 or 4 years ago, was by force. You didn't adopt new tech because you loved it or because you thought it was awesome. I mean, maybe some of us did, but most people didn't have a choice, right? If you want to do this thing, ride the train, do your banking, you need to engage with digital technology. And what that meant was companies could get away with having really kind of shitty experiences for a lot of this stuff. And we would put up with it because we didn't have a choice. That's changing. That's already changed quite dramatically. And you know, everybody's already said this, but the real watershed moment was the iPhone. It was the first time that normal people could have a device where they created their own ecosystem. They could decide which of the 250 alarm clocks in the App Store they wanted to use. We now get to decide which businesses, which services we want to interact with. And we choose to interact with the ones that make us feel the best. And what makes us feel good varies from person to person. Some people like to feel like they're getting the best deal. Some people like to have personalized service. Some people like to share everything with their friends. But there's now a choice for every one of us. And it's not even so much about the technology itself. It's about the mass democratization of services. So almost anyone can make an app and put it in the App Store. You learn how to do it, you do it. Almost anyone can now rent their flat on Airbnb. Almost anyone can put their car up for hire by the hour in lots of cities around the world. These peer-to-peer engagements mean that whatever I want in terms of a place to stay, whatever you want in terms of an app, whatever Martin wants in terms of an alarm clock, he can pick, I can pick, And this means that the businesses that have traditionally had the markets cornered on this stuff are panicking because they can't keep up. How can one company offer the same amount of choice as a million human beings? It can't be done. So that means that more than ever now, all of us need to be thinking about how do we make things that people value, that people love, that make people happy. People pay for what makes them happy. People will back you if you give them something that they feel is valuable. And I think this is particularly important in regard to a lot of the stuff that's been talked about this morning. So Internet of Things, interfaces that no longer have screens, interacting with things that don't have that touch feedback, that don't use existing paradigms that we're used to. AR, if I'm walking down the street wearing Google Glasses, how do I interact with that display? How do I tell it what I want to see and not see? Do I start talking to myself like a lunatic? Or do I break into impromptu interpretive dance and do some kind of gestural thing? I don't know. But we need to think about this stuff. We need to think about this stuff quite carefully because, frankly, how well we design these experiences will determine whether or not the tech gets adopted by people. And it's only when the tech gets adopted by people that we get to make more cool shit off the back of it, right? So that's essentially my crusade, is putting people first. And this obviously begs the question, how do you do it? How do you make things that people love? How do you make things that people value? And I could go on for days about this, quite literally, but I'm going to keep it simple and stick to 3 basic principles. So, number 1, why is more important than what? Why is more important by far than what? What happened is interesting, but you have no idea how to respond to it until you know why. So, for example, to take a totally unrealistic example and say, let's say my personal website gets 100,000 unique visitors today. Never happen. And gets 4 tomorrow. That's interesting. What do I do about it? No way to know unless I understand why it happened. Is it because I posted something yesterday that went viral and a million people wanted to flame me? Is it because I said something yesterday that made everybody really, really angry, and so now nobody's paying attention to me anymore? Or is it because someone out there fat-fingered a URL and accidentally sent 100,000 people to my website? Unless I know the answer to that question, unless I understand why something happened, I have no idea how to respond to it or what to do about it or how to change it. And so why is more important than what? The second principle is to be humble is as important as to be brave. So we talk about innovation a lot, and we talk about taking chances, we talk about doing new things, we talk about pushing boundaries, and I am 2,000% for this. But it's also really important to be humble because, let's face it, most of the world does not think the way that we do, the people in this room. Most of the world, the stuff that we think is really obvious, painfully, blindingly obvious, the rest of the world will go, huh? So we need to have that humility to be able to take on board what we see and what other people think. And finally, and this is the one that I will probably wind up spending the least amount of time talking about because you guys know this one better than pretty much anyone. You're never done. You should never ever think that, okay, now that it's out in the market, I'm done, I can chill out and never have to think about it again. No, nothing's ever fully finished. There's always iteration. It always keeps going. It keeps evolving, ideally, if you do it right. So those are the 3 principles. And all 3 of them apply sort of throughout the process of making things. So I'll get into that a little bit. First, why is more important than what? I have observed in the last 16 years that the best product ideas, the absolute best product ideas, and the things that people love the most come from real human desire. Right? And I'm not saying you need to go out on the street and interview 50 people and ask them, what would you like me to make an app for? Because people aren't able to tell you about things that they've never imagined. What I am saying is that the products that work the best are things that are based on observing people. And I know that, every time I'm in an airport and I don't spend all my time looking at one of my mobiles, I'm sitting there watching people wander around and they're struggling with something. There's always something about their experience that could be improved. These are the things that wind up really working for people. These are the things that make a real difference. If you sit and watch somebody, I don't know, in the supermarket struggling to find a product, that's an opportunity. You make something easier for them. They will love you for it. It could be really simple and unsexy, but they will love it. It makes a big difference. One example I used with a client not long ago was, I'm not always that bright, and sometimes in airports in the morning I'm not very awake either. So it's not uncommon for me to be in the airport, get through security, and then sort of stand in the duty-free store and stare blankly at a shelf of stuff for, I don't know, a long time, and then nearly miss my flight because I've missed the boarding announcement and whatever. If I'm checked in, why can't somebody send me a text so at least my phone vibrates and I know it's time to get on the plane and I don't wind up making a mad dash and looking like a total retard? This is a really simple little thing. It's not incredibly sexy. It's not incredibly high-tech. It would make a really big difference to me and possibly to other people. These are the kinds of things that we could observe and build products on. So that's about inspiration, letting your inspiration come from people, from the people around you, or from your own experiences. I mean, another example is My Taxi or Halo. I don't know if you guys have that here. No? Okay, so both of those, I like Halo's for me the favorite example. How many people here have been to London? Ooh, almost everyone. All right. So, if you've been to London, you know the difference between a black cab and a minicab. Black cabs, great drivers, they know where they're going. Minicabs, dodgy, smelly, yeah. So essentially you want a black cab. It's a much better experience. However, until really recently, it was a frequent occurrence, at least for me, to be standing somewhere in the West End, on a corner, at, 11 at night, and there's just no unoccupied cabs. I know that there's like 50 of them within 4 blocks of me, but none of them are going past the particular corner that I'm standing on. So Halo now lets me hail one using my iPhone or my Android device. Essentially, I just hail a black cab. It's genius. And they email me receipts so I can never lose it. I love them. They make me really happy. And this is just an obvious thing. If you've been to London, you've experienced this. Based on human observation. Nobody asked them to do it, but it resonates. It makes sense. Once you get into the process of making something, it can be really useful to put something in people's hands and ask them what they think of it. But there again, you need to think about the why behind the what. So if I put something in your hands that you've never seen before, never imagined before, is completely sort of out of left field for you, it's very unlikely that you are in 15 seconds going to be able to give me a realistic response of whether or not you would use this in the wild. It takes some time to adjust. We're human. We need some time to kind of process things and think them through and figure out whether or not this is useful or cool or whether or not it works properly. Sometimes we need weeks to figure that out. Sometimes services don't start to really catch on for months or even years after they launch because it takes people time to figure out where they fit into their lives. If you observe people playing with your prototype, whether it's on paper or on a device or on the magical interwebs, if you observe them, then you can ask clarifying questions. You can understand not just what they're doing, but why, or what they're not doing and why they're not doing what you expected them to. And the corollary to that will come up in the next section, which is about humility. Finally, when you put things out into the market, that's when this thing happens. Just people switch off and they think, right, so now the only thing I need to care about is how many downloads, how many people have paid for it, and that's it. Again, no. You'll do much better if you try to figure out why. Why did you have a bunch of downloads in the first week and then sort of slow off to a drip? Well, maybe it's because you had bad reviews. Maybe it's because really the interactivity of whatever you've put out there is only interesting for a couple of days. Unless you know why, you don't know how to adjust. Maybe you need to put the word out more. Maybe you need to improve the experience. Maybe you need to add more interactivity to it. I don't know, but you can't know. You can't improve that unless you think about the why behind what's happening. So, why, way more important than what. Second principle, humility. So, when you go out into the world and you observe people doing things or not doing things, or you yourself have an idea of, hey, you know, I'd really love it if I could hail a cab with my iPhone, for instance. That one, okay. That's it. There's very few arguments against that sort of thing. But a lot of ideas, I mean, again, we're weird. We think about technology in different ways. Sometimes that means we're ahead of the curve, and we can make something that people will really catch on to. Other times that means I might come up with an idea that nobody else on the planet is even remotely interested in. And part of being a good designer, part of being effective in this process, is being humble enough to accept the fact that your idea isn't the right one, or you haven't framed it properly, or whatever it is that goes against your expectations or against what's in your head. It's not about you, it's not about your ego, it's not even about the technology. It's about making the connection between the people and the things that they want to do, need to do, love to do. And technology is how we all do that. That's our job. So as you go through the process of making things and putting them in people's hands and watching people engage with them and watching how people use or don't use your stuff, this becomes a balancing act. So on the one hand, if you're in the middle of a dev process and you throw some prototypes out into the wild and people behave in radically different ways to what you expected, that could, if you try to take all that stuff on board, it could completely derail your process, which is not useful. If you take none of it on board, you run the risk of making everybody miserable, which is also not good. So it becomes a balancing act, and I wish I could tell you that there's some hard and fast rule of how to do that. There isn't. I mean, but this is why I think it's so important to, right from the beginning, have real, observed, tangible, human goals that you're trying to achieve with whatever you're doing. Because that then helps you steer, that helps you navigate feedback, new tech, new developments in the marketplace. It helps you make better decisions if you have something that's anchored to the people who are on the receiving end. Because those people, they're always going to be the ones that you need to worry about, even if the technology changes, even if the business landscape changes. Yes. So the third principle, you're never done. And this is looping all of the things together. I don't think anybody in this room is probably big into the whole waterfall development process where you take like 7 months to put something into the marketplace and then realize, ooh, that wasn't the right thing. Unfortunately, for those of us who work in agencies, we know that a lot of our clients are really into that. And I'll give you one of my top tips on how to deal with that. The question I tend to ask is, okay, fair enough. How much of your budget do you want to spend before you have the vaguest clue whether or not you're doing the right thing? It's a legitimate question, but that's not how they think about it. So we know that when we prototype and iterate and tweak things as we go, we're a lot more effective, we get a lot more done, we get a lot more feedback, and we ourselves get better ideas as we develop our products. Our clients don't necessarily know that. Business people don't necessarily understand that. They are afraid of putting the wrong thing out there. They're afraid of people getting angry or unhappy with the things that they make. We need to help them understand that it's a balancing act that you can be successful at. You can put things in people's hands and have them not really like them, and then come round on the next turn and have them love them, and then you've won trust and you've made an impact. And this idea that you are at some point finished and can stop observing and stop caring about the people on the other end is patently insane. This goes back to understanding why. It goes back to the humility. This fact that you've put something in the App Store doesn't mean you can walk away and never think about it again. I think every product will show you its successor. Every product will show you its next version, or the thing that replaces it, or the thing that sits alongside it and makes it better. If you just watch how people interact with it. So one more time, the principles are: why is more important than what? Understand what's under behavior. And there's another point to that, actually. Most of what drives us, most of our behavior, is predicated on unconscious stuff. So cognitive science tells us that at most, at absolute most, about 20% of any conversation is to do with the words coming out of our mouths. The other 80 to 95% is to do with body language and eye contact and the atmosphere in the room and how hot it is in here and whether or not you had wine with lunch and pheromones and God knows. I mean, things we're not even aware that we're taking in, right? And these are shaping our responses. These are shaping our behaviors, our understanding, our context of the situation. We don't even understand how we make decisions. So this idea that we can somehow teach machines to make decisions that in any way mimic our own is kind of ridiculous. There's no way that we can teach a machine to do something that we can't do. We can't, I mean, machines aren't, there's no such thing as a smart device. Devices are very well informed and can do some tricks. But really, either we are smart or we are not. Either we use them well or we don't. It's not the technology, it's the way we use it, it's the people on the other end. The second principle, review, was humility is as important as bravery. Yes, it is totally important to get out there and do stuff that nobody's done before. It is critical in pushing technology forward to not be afraid to have people look at you like you're a crazy person. People look at me like I'm a crazy person all the time. A lot of you are right now, actually. But, I mean, as important as that is, it's also important that we not develop this attitude of, just because I work in tech and have done for 16 years, then I know better than you. I don't. I don't know better than anyone. I'm just a person. I've got my ideas. Everybody else has got theirs. Somehow, it's a matter of calibrating this and putting it together so that we get a better outcome for everyone, yeah? And finally, you're never done. Never give up, never sit down, never kick back, never, I mean, yeah. Have a launch party, drink several bottles of champagne, sleep in, have a hangover, but then get back on it and start paying attention again, because you never are done, or you never should be done. There's always a way to make things better. There's always a way forward. So those are the principles, and I wanted to spend a little bit of time now talking about kind of the other side of that. So this struck me again in some of the talks this morning. There's so much about technology, about the stuff that's coming up, about the stuff that's, you know, been around for a while, but like AR we're finally starting to get that balance of hardware and services and content and accuracy that we can just about see it kind of beginning to really enter the marketplace. And this is hugely exciting. And what this means is that everyone in this room, every one of us, is in some way, small, medium, or large, shaping the future. We are shaping the digital world around us, and increasingly, everyone's headed into digital. So we are, in fact, changing the world, all of us. And there's good and there's bad to that. The question is, this future that we're making, all of us together, taken en masse, is it the future that we want? And I think that the only way that we can have any kind of assurance that we wind up in a future that we all want to inhabit is to keep this focus on what makes us uniquely human instead of what makes the technology go. I mean, if you think about it, just take a second and imagine yourself 10 years from now. 10 years out. Where do you want to be? Think about it really simply. What's your window? What do you see when you look out your window? Who's sitting next to you? What are you going to do that day? If you think about this, and you think about what we're making, technology-wise, this could go a lot of different ways. I mean, a lot of the vision movies I see online these days kind of resemble Minority Report a little bit, which is kind of cool, but also really, really creepy. So this picture in your head of where you want to be in 10 years' time, what do you see out the window? I mean, is it a window? Or is it maybe a screen? And you can adjust it to show whatever landscape you want? Because if it is, and you can do that, cool. Chances are it's going to be covered in brand logos and advertising. And chances are you're going to wake up in the morning, there's going to be some scene on there that may or may not be what you want to see, but that somebody's decided is what you really should be looking at that day. And you see where I'm going with this? This could get quite dystopian and irritating quite quickly. Because we are obsessed, all of us, myself included, with how do we make better algorithms? How do we evaluate data better? How do we take all of this massive richness of information and translate it into something that people can interact with? That's one way that we might do it. I'm not really that fond of that vision. I don't know about you guys, but I would prefer to have a window. that I can look out of and see my garden. And if I want a screen, there's one over there. What are you going to do today? Is another question. I mean, one of my pet obsessions of late has been this quantified self movement. I love the idea of having data about myself, of being able to understand myself and my habits better, and using that to have a better life, have better quality of life, be healthier, whatever. But I'm less comfortable with this idea that someone else has decided what it means for me to be healthy, for me to be a good person, for me to, I don't know, somebody else, somebody somewhere, I don't even know who, has decided that unless I do 4,000 what's-its a day, I am unhealthy. And I deserve to be punished. And the last thing, I mean, you will notice I have none of this kit on. It's because the last thing I need is something that I wear on my wrist that's going to be cranky with me if I don't do what it thinks I should do. Who's decided what it takes for me to have quality of life? How is that anybody else's business except for my own? So it's an interesting question about ownership and control that's easy to forget when we're thinking about how the technology interacts with the service, which interacts with the data, which then interacts with an interface or a data visualization. There's so many problems to solve at this detailed level that it can be really easy to lose sight of this really basic question of who are we to decide, even for each other, what we're supposed to do from one moment to the next, from one day to the next. And how much worse would that be, or how much, okay, maybe not worse, but creepier would that be if it extended beyond how many miles you're supposed to run a day and went to which music you're supposed to be listening to today? Because this music is good for concentration, and you're meant to be concentrating now because you're writing code. And this music is what makes you run faster, and you need to run faster so that you're healthier. And you need to read these books at night, not these books, because these books keep you awake and give you weird dreams. And these books bore you straight to sleep in 5 minutes. Or whatever. I mean, if we just extend the stuff that we're making now, that is cool, a little bit in the wrong direction, things get really creepy really quickly. But if we keep the focus on each other, on humans, it can help to curtail this. If you think about what humans are really great at, we're great at pattern spotting. We are better at pattern spotting than any machine that's ever been made. Put a pattern in front of a human and they will make up a story about it instantly. There's loads of experiments in cognitive psych about this. There's one of my favorites is to do with subliminal messaging. You guys know about subliminal messaging? Yeah, so you essentially flash a word in front of somebody's eyes for, microseconds, so long enough that it makes an impression on the brain, but not on the conscious brain. And the person will do whatever they have been instructed to do, right? So in this experiment, I'm not going to walk off the stage, all right? In this experiment, people sat down, flashed the word walk, and the subject gets up and starts walking across the room, and they stop them about 3 steps in and say, hey, where are you going? And without any hesitation whatsoever, the subject said, oh, I'm going to get a glass of water. I'm really thirsty. No, you're not. You're walking because you were told to. But this is how good we are. We are that good. We are that good at making stories. We are that good at pattern spotting that we just do it automatically. And there's got to be some way for us to harness that instead of, somebody's benchmarks from somewhere. There's got to be a way that we can use what makes us human to make our lives better as individuals and for each other, and to educate each other. And I think that, that's why I'm on this crusade. That's why I'm perpetually on this crusade, to get people to put the humans at the heart of the system. Because I think it's the only way that we're going to wind up with a system that we like, that's palatable, that makes a positive future. And my experience working with clients, large and small, everything from startups to massive international organizations, is that when you do this, even at a really low level, even just starting small, when you put people first, amazing things happen. A product that makes a small difference to actual human beings can have massive positive impact on business. It can have massive impact on adoption of new tech. It can have massive impact on society, on quality of life in a city. MJ's and Martin and I did a workshop a couple of months ago at MozFest where we asked people about to imagine ways to use connected objects to improve quality of life in an urban environment. And we, of course, came in there with loads of ideas of what we expected to see. What we walked away with was an unbelievable spectrum of things that would never have occurred to us, because quality of life means different things to different people. If you put this question to people, you get amazing input. You get so much broader perspective than you ever could by yourself. And yeah, so I'm a big believer in harnessing our collective imaginations, and not just us who love technology, but people who don't think about tech at all, because they do think about life, sometimes in ways that we've forgotten how to. So in closing, I just kind of to tell you what I've told you. The way that technology is going and the rate at which change is accelerating means that there's less and less chances for us to really stop and have a big, long think about things. We are forever driving forward. We are forever going faster. Technology is forever evolving faster. And it's up to us and our compatriots all over the world, to help to make technology and the future of technology the future that we want. And we do that, I think, by putting people first and putting humans at the heart of the system. And when we do that, really great things can happen, not just for business and tech and society, but for every one of us as well. And that's all I've got. Thanks for listening. Came in under time.
Wow, I actually had a good time reading the tweets about your session, so it was kind
God.
of...
I forgot to tell you guys my handle. It's Custom Deluxe.
Yeah, well, we found it out, and kind of my mistake that I didn't mention it earlier.
Oh, I said so. Yeah. Mine too.
So it was kind of a philosophical lullaby after lunch, but I noted from the tweets that people actually did love it, so that's good.
Good. I wasn't looking. I think I was afraid to look. Good. But no, but I didn't see anybody fall asleep, so it's a bonus. Thank you guys for paying attention.
So any questions about Louisa's session?
Ask me a hard one.
I've got a hard question.
Where are you?
In the back here.
Right there in the back.
Yes. Hi.
So what do you think about sharing personal data? Do you think that there's lines that can be crossed or that we've already crossed? What's your opinion on that?
How much time you got?
All day.
Yeah, I could go on. All right, I'm not going to talk all day. What I think about sharing personal data is that, well, one, it should be up to every one of us what gets shared and what doesn't. That having been said, I think there's a lot of challenges around that. This is another one of my pet obsessions at the moment. And it's a really difficult problem to crack. I've been thinking about it for at least a year now, and I haven't cracked it yet. But right now, what's happening is so much data is being generated by our lives on an ongoing basis, and that data is being collected and essentially hoarded by a lot of very large organizations, people like Amazon, people like Facebook, some of which are more nefarious than others in terms of their intent. What I would love to see is a future where I have access to that information, and then I get to broker it however I want. Do you know Doc Searles? Are you familiar with him? Okay, Doc Searles is this, he's one of the sort of pioneers of the magical interwebs, and he's been working on this project for years called VRM. It stands for Vendor Relationship Management, whereas right now what everybody's dealing with is customer relationship management. And the idea is that instead of Amazon or whoever having all this information about you and then pushing stuff at you that you may or may not be interested in relentlessly all the time, that you have all the information about you, and then you put something out into the world when you're looking for something. So, for instance, I am looking for, I don't know, a new television. Not that I am, but I'm looking for a new television, and I've got this much money to spend, and there's a time-limited, you know, here's the information that you need to know about me. You can have it for 3 weeks until somebody gives me the right offer. So this idea that I would like to see that turn. I think it'll take a while before we get there. I think that, so that's one answer. And the other side of that is that I think that there's a difference between giving access to data and actually sharing it and making meaning of it. So on a more humanitarian side, one of the biggest problems in the developing world is education. There are millions of children who have no access to education, and it's not because they're lazy, and it's not because their villages are lazy or their parents don't want them to learn. It's because there just isn't money to hire teachers. What they do usually have access to is these things. And what we've started to see happening in the world is people sharing their knowledge for free and sharing information about how they have learned for free. And that helps other people learn about stuff. So if I'm able to share my learnings about how my, music listening habits affect my sleep patterns, then that might help somebody else in this room. So there's this idea of sort of reciprocal value-based sharing that's much more human than, somebody owns your data or not. Very long-winded, but did that begin to answer your question? Cool. Anyone else? Yay.
Just one more.
My feeling is that computer interfaces are usually much more rude than real people. So, I'm trying to buy some airline tickets, and then the system says to me that error, some validation error, and something failed, and doesn't tell me what to do. So I don't know if you have any comments or feelings about this.
Yeah, well, on the level of rudeness, that you just reminded me of one of my all-time favorite quotes. Not what you asked, but you guys will probably like it. Is if I talk to you like advertising talked to you, you'd punch me in the face. Advertising just being really obnoxious, but it is true, and I think that's something that you automatically notice if you've got the human in mind as you're designing a system. I mean, one of the most overlooked aspects of a service is usually error handling. Nobody even thinks about error handling until the development team comes up during testing and says, okay, these 17 things don't work at all. And then all of a sudden you've got to write an error handling system, and there's nobody left from the design team, or nobody can afford a copywriter, and you wind up with these fuck you errors. And it's just it's horrific because it can ruin an otherwise great experience. But I think that's why I'm such a crusader for put the human in focus all the time. If the human's in focus all the time, then that's not going to happen because you're thinking about that person that you're talking to, and you don't want to upset them, and you don't want to be rude. Yay.
Good. Keep it going.
Yeah, we've still got time. Yeah.
When we're thinking that we're trying to solve the problems of the users, are we actually just making them stare at their screens more?
Wow, cynical question. I like it. Yes, sometimes. Well, yeah, but that's part of the first question, right? So what is the problem you're trying to solve, and whose problem is it really? Because a lot of businesses will say, yes, we must make an app that enables people to do this. When actually they do just want people to stare at their screens more so they can serve them more advertising. This is kind of to my point about humility, and also the why is more important than what. I mean, I think that if attention is your goal as a business or as a service, if you want to hold people's attention for longer, the best way to do that is to honestly engage with the human. Have a conversation of some sort. Have some kind of exchange that makes them happy or brings value in some way, rather than trying to trick them into something. And so it is about honesty as well as humility, I suppose, and being honest with ourselves about what we're making, which can sometimes be depressing depending on who your client is.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. And you're going to have the pleasure of flying to Prague pretty much right after the
Yeah, I'm sorry, guys.
session.
I'm around for, another 15 minutes.
All right. So thanks again.
Thanks, Petra.
Great having you here.